Greetings. So today we're going to be looking at the Showcase Miniatures N-scale Class C Shay Locomotive shell kit. It's called a shell kit because there's no power to go with it. In order to power this engine, you need a N-scale 9mm power truck. Choice of one truck or two trucks if you want extra power. We're going to put two trucks into our Shay, and here's what comes in the kit. You have everything is individually packaged in accordance with the steps we're going to be taking. Here's the cab that is 3D printed. It has some areas that need to be broken out that were supports during the 3D printing. Here's the 3D printed boiler. And we have the tender with the trucks. And here we have the main chassis. We'll have to trim some of these cross pieces out. Some couplings, trucks. This is a tool for bending a few of the pieces. And we have some etched parts here that are real small. And that's about it. As I mentioned before, in order to make this work, you're going to have a power truck, at least one. We're going to be using two, and there's not much to the truck. It's just the power truck is just this little guy here. Comes with an extra long shaft. We'll be snipping that off because we're not going to use it for anything. And there's a etched adapter that needs to be folded up, and that goes on top of the truck to adapt it to the engine or the tender. So that's about it for now. The kit comes with a nice set of instructions set up with individual steps of how to do it with the pieces, and very nicely detailed instructions for this little kit. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these cross pieces here, which is part of the casting process for these parts. And there's 6 of them that we're going to have to remove, shown here in the purple. The instructions show this area right here, this little scoop, show that as being cut out right in that area there. Yeah. But my kit came with the front plate here already installed, so don't be confused about that. This, in the instructions, this looks scooped out, but it has the front plate cover on it. The engine is 3D printed, but it has all of these support lines added on that have to be trimmed off very carefully with a sharp hobby knife. So that'll be the next thing we're going to attempt. So here we go. So this completes the subassembly. So I'll be painting this now rather than waiting until it's all assembled so I can do a better job painting. Next time you see it, she'll be painted. So now we're going to work on the engine cover assembly. We have this photo etched piece that we need to cut out right here. That's the fender assembly. We need to make a few bends in it. So we have the basic bends. Now we have to make the rounded bend in it. So we have this little bending jig here they provide you with. So I'm going to get this started by holding it and bending this over. Gives us a start. Now, we need to grab this across here and squeeze it. That gives us the roundy bend we need. There'll be some final tweaking of this in a little while. Watch out for those guys, they go flying. So next we're going to add the tank onto the fender, and then we're going to add the piping onto the tank. If I don't lose the piping. Next, we're going to install the piping onto the tank here. These little ends that are straight they should be bent in to go down to the tank. Doesn't tell you to do that in the instructions, but I'm going to do it anyhow. So now we've secured the piping onto the tank with a little bit of CA glue. So that completes the fender assembly. So the next sub-assembly we're going to be working on is the boiler. And we'll be gluing these pieces onto the boiler. And you have to be careful that you trim all the little pieces of slag off from these die-cast parts. Right there's some more. So you want to trim those off first and make sure your fit is good before you try and glue them on. These pieces are tiny, so be careful when you put them on. These pieces are so tiny. With the boiler parts all installed, the next thing is to install this handrail on the boiler. Well, I've cut out the handrail for the boiler. Now we have to cut out these incredibly small handrail supports. Luckily they gave us some extras because I'm sure I'm going to lose one or two of them. I put some blue tape behind the small supports so they wouldn't go flying when I cut them. Seemed to work pretty well. So here are the 4 aft supports for the handrail, and they go on the boiler. 1, 2, 3, 4. The holes weren't quite big enough, so I'm drilling them out. The 3D printed parts has holes here, but they're good for location, but they're too small for the fittings that go in there. So you can see here that I've gotten the 4 aft supports for the handrail on here, and now I'm going to go work on putting the 2 smaller ones up here. I've already got one of the little handrail supports in the tweezers, but I just thought I'd show you how small these little supports actually are. There's one right there. So now we're going to see if we can put that into the boiler. Going to put a little bit of super glue there. Now let's see if we can get this in there. We're in. Now that we have the 4 handrail supports here, 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 and here, so we're going to make a slight bend just about opposite this most forward support right here before we install that. With the handrail bent here now, I'm going to install this first around the headlight, and then I'll worry about these supports later after this is glued and dried. So here is the completed boiler subassembly. I think those handrail supports are going to be the hardest thing of this whole kit. The next step is to build the cab. First thing you want to do is make sure that all of the flashing is removed from any of the metal parts. Then on the cab itself, this is a 3D printed part, so there's a number of supports that need to be removed. All of the areas inside the windows have to be removed. Inside the cab here, on the bottom, these supports, and this little box in here, which is also a 3D printing support. So we'll start removing those things. And these just break out. And then we have to open up all the windows. You got to be careful, this support right here stays. I mistakenly popped that out. But that'll be covered by the window frame. Okay, so I didn't like that broken out window frame, so I spliced in a little piece to make that hole. To install the roof, they recommend using canopy glue, so that's what we'll be using today on the canopy. They recommend using canopy glue for the roof in case you need to remove it sometime in the future. And the same thing for the little hatch that goes on top of that. We still need to add the sliding side windows to the cab, the end windows to the cab, and the handrails. So we'll be doing that next. So here's the window. I'll put it up on the cab here. I'm going to have our window open a little bit here. Here's the completed cab. All the little handrails, the windows, all installed. The instructions say to assemble the locomotive at this time, but I'm going to hold off on doing that because I want to paint all my black parts at the same time, the black sub-assemblies. I'm going to move on to the tender sub-assembly for now. This is a little rail that goes on top. The little ladder is next. This comes from the photo etch sheet, and I just bent it over the end of a rounded toothpick to get the bend. And that will mount right here on the tender. So that completes the assembly on the tender. Now we're ready to paint all the black parts. These are all the parts that need to be painted black. So we're going to be dry brushing with silver enamel. Sorry about that. So the idea with dry brushing is to load up your brush with the paint and then completely wipe it dry. And then you just brush it over the area where you want to highlight. That just brings out some of the detail. And just bringing out some of the highlights here. We'll continue to do that on the other parts. Here's some detail of the dry brushing effect. So here's the engine with the detail work done. And there's some detail work on the boiler as well. Next we'll be assembling the power truck. That's this little guy right here. Note that this doesn't come with the kit, and you have a choice of putting 1 or 2 power units into the locomotive. For mine, I'm going to put 2 in. 1 goes in the locomotive and 1 goes in the tender. So what this involves is bending up this sheet so it fits over here as like a saddle, and then attaching the trucks onto that, and then trimming off this shaft. They leave a long shaft on the truck to allow you to do some experimenting with that if you wanted to power some other stuff off of this, but we're not going to do that, so we'll just be trimming this off close with a pair of snippers. So here's the saddle that we're going to bend. It's pretty simple to bend it up. It just sits on there as a friction fit. So you can see right here, there's a possible problem because this is made out of brass. And we have our contacts right here. So I'm going to put some clapped-on tape right there. That capped-on tape will protect the contacts on both sides. So I'll put that on before I slide on the saddle. There's a small screw that has to be installed in the saddle with either CA glue or epoxy. So we'll put some in there with a CA glue. I'll put a little CA glue around the hole. And here's the little screw that needs to go there. So there's our screw in the saddle. We'll set that aside to dry. So here's the power truck with the capped-on tape covering over the contacts. So here's a shim that goes up inside the saddle to provide clearance for the screw we CA'd in there. And you'll see that this saddle has an adapter plate on top of it. That's needed for the one that goes under the cab. The one that goes under the tender doesn't use that adapter. The adapter is included with the kit. And then the end trucks here will go on. They mount right onto the saddle in this location after we put the saddle on the power truck. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the side frames on the inside have a little tab. One's kind of a rectangle and one of them's kind of like a bar. And these fit into the little cutouts in the saddle on each side. There's the one that's kind of square. And there's one that kind of looks like a bar. So they have an individual side that they're made to go on, and that's because one side has a drive shaft. You see the drive shaft right here, and the other one doesn't. So we need to get them on the right side. So we'll CA this truck end cap on. You want to make sure you have clearance with both wheels. So here it is on the test track. Looks like it could use some running in, but looks like it's going to work. So here we are with all the sub-assemblies completed. Now it's just a matter of putting it all together, and we'll get started on that right away. So the cab screws onto the frame with 4 small screws. So there's the cab all attached to the frame. The next will be attaching the boiler. We're going to attach the boiler to the frame with canopy glue, just in case we have to remove it later. And just hold that in position for a minute until it dries. So the locomotive now is basically assembled. All we need to do now is add the trucks and the power train. She'll be ready to go. So we'll put just a touch of grease here. And a washer. Another little touch. So we're ready to put some finishing touches on the locomotive. I got the little ladders to go there, and a little bit of painting to touch-up painting to do, and then the decals, and then we'll be finished.